An hour of your time this Thursday afternoon to talk about this new RFP. And so we're going to keep reminding you too, because I was saying to Shannon, I was trying to think of all the questions I had when this RFP came out, and I was so confused. Why another NOFO? What is HUD doing? So this is totally and separately completely different than the regular HUD NOFO, which curiously enough has not been released yet. We actually anticipate that may be out even tomorrow or sometime next week. But this is what we're calling the supplemental NOFO, or HUD's calling it the supplemental NOFO. And as part of that, there is funding available, and we're going to keep talking about this today, but there's funding available for unsheltered and rural projects. And so that's what we're talking about today. So if you're confused, I was confused, it's all right to be confused. Well, our job today is to make this less confusing, answer questions, and get you out by 2 and give you some resources. So I'm Liz Isaacs from Housing Innovation, joined by my coworker, Shannon Quinn Sheeran.
Hey, everybody.
And we're excited you guys joined us. We definitely welcome questions, comments, concerns. So jump in. We always say this, but we want it to be conversational. There are no dumb questions. There's nothing that you should know about this. So we're still wrapping our heads around it. HUD has not even released the detailed instructions yet. So more information is to come. But as you know, we like to get the information out to you guys, get rolling on our process. So we can just keep moving here. So please jump in. If you're not talking, if you can stay muted, that would be great. But chat, raise your hand, ask a question, and get your questions answered. Uh-oh. What's going on? Oh, there you go. All right. So here's our agenda. Oh, you know what? Shannon had a great idea. Shannon, you want to ask your question?
Oh, I wanted to know, or maybe you can raise your hands or type something in the chat, if there's anybody here who wasn't at the original bidders conference that we had for the regular NOFO this year. So that would have been about 2 months ago when we did that process, just because a lot of the information is the same. So we want to kind of have an idea of how in depth we have to go into some of the same information. So there's a few.
So Shannon, I'm sorry, they're raising their hands if they were not.
Yeah.
Okay. If you
And
were
there's
not,
a few.
oh, good. So we have a bunch of new people.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Great. Great. So welcome. And this is the PowerPoint is done for brand new folks. So the people who've gone through this, we have updated it. There's additional information. But if you've been in Zengen before, if you've applied for projects before, it'll look very similar. So that's good. All right. Thank you. So this is our agenda. I'm going to just tell you what this is all about, give you a sense of deadlines, what's happening, talk about the rules. Some sections, depending on which project type you're applying for, will look the same. Some will be different. We're going to make sure that you know how to use Zengen. We'll tell you a little bit about scoring factors and then do some tips and reminders and questions. All right, this is really, really important. So, you know, they say if you walk away from a presentation and you can only remember one thing, this is going to be the one thing everyone remembers. And I'm just going to call her out. Lauren Peretti did a fantastic job and did a fantastic set of instructions. It is 22 pages of information. I think like the last 5 or 10 are in appendices. They're very, very important. They tell you all the rules. They tell you whether you should apply. If you go in and you start Zengen, there's a good chance you'll say, oh, whoops, I'm not even eligible, or what I want to do doesn't make any sense. So please read the instructions. Throughout Zengen, the way that it's set up to collect information, it's not possible, and wouldn't make sense. It would be very clunky for us to put 20 pages of instructions. We've really tried to streamline the application process, and Shannon has been our technical wizard that kind of each go round, we try to make Zengen more user-friendly. And I think it really is, but part of the reason it is because we don't have pages and pages of instructions. So for those of you who have 2 screens, you might want to, I would say, read the instructions before you even get started, but then maybe have the instructions up on one screen or flip between screens. I'm old school. People can make fun of me. I actually print them out because I enjoy reading them at my leisure and then having them at the side of my computer.
For your bed, you know.
It's not very earth friendly, but anyway, so if you leave this hour-long training with one thing, it's that the instructions have to be read before you even think about moving ahead, please. So that's that.
Raina has her hand raised, and I just want to make sure, I don't know if you have a question or if that was
question?
raised saying you weren't there before.
Oh, maybe it is. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So as I mentioned before, that you're gonna keep hearing us call this the supplemental NOFO. So again, the supplemental NOFO, it's from HUD, but it's totally separate from the NOFO we do every year. So for what's available in terms of funding that you would care about, there is over $17 million over 3 years for the unsheltered piece, and we're going to talk about what that means. And for the rural piece, there's over $900,000 over 3 years. The other thing that's very important is that the only folks who can apply for the rural are people who will serve people in Litchfield County. And our caveat before you start throwing vegetables at us, rotten vegetables at us, we don't have anything to do with the eligibility for that. HUD decides it. So HUD put a list together for every state who can apply. So you can be an agency not physically located in Litchfield County, but you must be serving people in Litchfield County. So that's really important too. So I live here. There are many rural places. Unfortunately, if you're in many places, many of the other rural places in Connecticut, you cannot apply for the rural piece, but you may still be interested in what's happening with the unsheltered piece. That doesn't preclude you from doing the unsheltered piece.
So I just want to jump in and say, if you apply for this NOFO, there's 2 parts. You can either do the unsheltered or the rural. Actually, if you were submitting more than one application, you could do one of each if you fit the criteria for each. And when we first saw it, we thought only if you're serving unsheltered people or if you're rural can you apply. But as we go through, you'll see that's really not the case. I think if we look at this with a broad lens and say, what am I doing in a PSH project that lessens or goes towards ending unsheltered homelessness in Connecticut, and you have a project that does that, then you can apply for this funding.
That's really helpful too, Shannon, because when I first looked at it, that was exactly, I thought, wow, that's just a small group of people, and it really isn't. So there, as you go through, you'll start seeing that the focus is to make sure that folks with the most severe needs are being helped. But that doesn't, like Shannon said, we know that can be handled in many different ways. So I didn't miss the one before, did I? No. So just as part of the background, we as CT BOS and Housing Innovations is going to do this. We need to develop a plan serving persons experiencing homelessness with the most severe service needs. And as part of that, we need to ask you, when you put in your project application, how you're going to help fulfill that plan, and that you're actually going to make a commitment to working together to fulfill that plan. Also, just again, as part of background, you do not need to do this next part, but we do. We need to get a letter of support so that we know that people with lived experience have actually reviewed the plan and endorsed the plan. So again, we're just giving background. You do not need to get a letter, but just so you know, that's what we'll be doing. We've mentioned you're going to submit this in ZenGen. We love our veterans to come back. We love seeing people who apply every year, but we also always want to increase our pool. We want to make sure that people know that everyone is welcome to apply. And so you do not have to have applied before. You do not need to be a COC funded agency. And we encourage everyone to apply. And we will provide technical assistance to anyone who needs help. So we can craft your argument for you, obviously, but please, please shoot us a note, call us if you're in ZenGen and you say, like, do I fill this out? This doesn't make any sense. You know, how am I categorizing myself? All those kinds of questions we are allowed to answer, and we can answer for everyone. This is the timeline. So I'm just looking at my time. So we just put this out yesterday. We're here today. Applications are due on the 17th of August, which is a quick turnaround. But as you know, HUD keeps us moving, and we have to go through a scoring committee and the steering committee and ranking in order to be able to submit these in a timely fashion to HUD. So hopefully we will get awards announced in the winter, and then there are grant agreements, and we have our fingers crossed. We're really excited about this new money, and we have such great providers in Connecticut. And so we really hope we can make this happen. So we'll start off with supportive services. So you can apply for street outreach, navigation, all kinds of things that you can think of that are supportive services only. It's important that you're using a housing-focused case management model. And when you're applying for services only, so and just for folks who have done it before, maybe you can visualize in ZenGen, and where you're going to apply, you're actually going to choose services only. And then, you know, you get the application that fits and ask the questions about supportive services only. And you can apply for supportive services, obviously, project administration funds, and HMIS. And this is really important because this hasn't always been available for folks. So what HMIS means is your licenses, your staff time with HMIS. And we know, I don't want to say only for, but just especially because we've been talking about it, for street outreach, like it's been a lot of work in general. It's an unfunded mandate for the work that folks do. And so it's really exciting that you can actually get funds for this. All right, what else can you ask for? You can ask for money for permanent supportive housing. You guys probably know how permanent supportive housing works. What's important here is that DEMIS would be the applicant and the grantee. You would be a sub-recipient, and you could apply for rental assistance, supportive services, HMIS, again, so I won't repeat that, and project administration. What you cannot do is, unfortunately, we cannot do expansion grants. So these are 3-year grants that are brand new. And we really looked into it. We tried to see, can we give people extra services on an existing PSH project? It just won't work. So these have to be brand new project, 3-year projects. Rapid rehousing. So what's important here is that DOH is the grantee, but I see somebody has a hand up. Eric, do you have a question?
Yes, guys, just a quick question on that previous slide for permanent supportive housing. There was another previous slide too that said 3 years. Does that mean that the grant isn't due for renewal until 3 years? Is that
correct?
Okay.
Yep.
In the second question on permanent supportive housing for services, I mean, you could be asking for new vouchers, correct?
Yes.
And you can also be asking for support services specifically for permanent supportive housing.
Yes.
Okay, and so on the support services, is it at least 5,000 you should be asking for support services? If there's no other funding for support services, and up to 9,000, which is it, or is it both?
You got it. You stole our thunder, Eric. That you just gave everyone. That's it, and we have a slide on it. That's the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Oh, Eric, I'm totally teasing. I love it. We love people to talk. I'm tired of hearing my own voice. You said it exactly right. The minimum is 5,000, and the maximum is 9,000. So you got it.
And also at the beginning, you said that no matter what project you're going for, you're either applying for rural or outreach.
Rural or
unsheltered.
Yes, correct.
So permanent supportive housing, if you're not in Litchfield and you're going for permanent supportive housing, you're applying for
unsheltered.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.
No, there's no sorry. That's all great questions. All great questions. So Shannon, when you're in ZenGen, right? That's like one of the first questions is, are you applying for rural or are you applying for unsheltered? Yep.
Right.
And you can apply for both. So if I'm in Litchfield County and I have a great rural project, I can apply for that. Then you got to go back in and create another application and you could do an unsheltered project. All right, good questions, good questions. Okay, rapid rehousing. So we know it's going to be DOH. Again, HMIS funds are available here, rental assistance, supportive services. For rapid rehousing, there is no project administration. if you want to talk to us offline, we can help you. That sometimes some indirect costs can overlap with admin. And so we can talk to you about that piece, but there is no project administration for rapid rehousing.
But also, if you're looking into indirect rates, there's a ton of information in the instructions, linked in the instructions,
Yep.
because that is a very in-depth topic.
Yep. Okay. Who can apply? Not-for-profits, state, local governments, public housing agencies, instrumentality. I love that, of state and local governments. Great. Other requirements, you know, we always make you say you're going to use the CANs, you're going to use HMIS, got to follow all the HUD and COC rules. You need to be in good standing with HUD. And then there's some other requirements, and you can see that in the application. All right, this is good news. If you have already applied through the regular COC competition, so I should back up for those of you who weren't interested or didn't know about it, we have already had one round we've already had a round of competition. So we put out the regular new funding. We already had the scoring committee meet, people submitted applications, but we want to be really strategic. And we also think it makes sense to give those folks the opportunity to apply for this. So if you are an organization who already put in a project application, you would not have heard anything back from us yet, so you haven't missed anything, but we will message out how you can apply for this funding with as little work as possible. So Shannon is making her magic happen in ZenGen, where you will not need to totally replicate your application, but you will need to submit specific sections that are relevant to the unsheltered.
Yeah, we will send out an email, but this should be done by sometime on Monday, that it'll be adjusted so that if you answer the question, yes, I've already submitted this year, only the new things for this supplemental NOFO opportunity should pop up for you.
Yeah. All right. So these sections you're going to apply, you're going to see no matter who you are. So say I'm a project or I'm an agency and I'm interested in applying for PSH, and I'm also going to do an SSO project. I'm going to see these for both of those. Obviously, if they're distinct projects, you have distinct answers, but these are sections that everyone's going to complete. So the applicant profile, this is familiar for any of you who have ever done this in ZenGen. So it asks for organizational experience and the management structure of your agency. But if you've already have an applicant experience, an applicant profile in there, you don't need to do another one, which is exciting. So again, we're really trying to cut to the chase for folks. I talked a little bit about this, but just to be a little more explicit, because we're doing this plan to serve people experiencing severe service needs, again, we need you to commit to fulfilling the plan. And you will see in the application, you're going to need to agree to that. And then you're going to all have to answer questions about how you're going to recruit and retain staff with lived experience, and how you're going to integrate folks with lived experience in the decision-making structure of your agency. So everyone is going to have to answer that. And that's a new question. I think Eric has a question. Yes.
A question on the sentence and what you're going to be measuring here or developing a plan on. Homeless with severe, when you say severe service needs, can anyone explain yet? How are you defining service needs, especially if we're going to sort of retire the VI SPDAT assessment tool?
That's a great question.
A very good question.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I just thought I would ask, just so I can prepare.
I will look in the NOFO again if there's an explanation. Yeah, so we will look into that. I don't want to say it's not there. I don't want to say it's not in the NOFO, but it's not at the tip of my tongue, and we're not remembering that. But
No.
yes, we will look into that.
Thank you.
Of course.
I just wanted to say on that last slide, sorry, but the recruit and retain people with lived experience and the integration of people with lived experience in the decision-making structures, those were big priorities for HUD for this NOFO opportunity. So that's the reason that we're asking you all to answer those questions. And I also want to say, even though this plan that the COC has to create has not yet been created, so you can't look at it and say, oh, yes, we will do this part of the plan or that. You can start thinking about how, again, like how I said in the beginning, how the project that you're proposing to create will end homelessness, and in particular, unsheltered homelessness in your area. So are you going to keep people, how are you going to find the people with the most severe service needs? So we'll look into that, but you can also think about that in your process as well. How are you going to take the people with the most severe needs? How are you going to find and identify those people? How are you going to get those people quickly into housing and connect them to the services that keep them housed, right? And how are you going to either keep them in your project, say if it's a PSH, or how are you going to exit them to permanent housing? All of these things which keep people housed and reduce homelessness in Connecticut.
Absolutely. And again, Eric's question is great. We will try to get some information on that. But I know what many of you are thinking right now, if I can try to read minds, is we're serving a lot of people with severe service needs. So once we say what the description is, many of you are already doing that, right? Those are the folks you are serving. Okay, so everyone's going to do a project description. You're going to talk about services and mainstream resources. There's some questions about outcomes. How are you going to coordinate with partners? And how are you going to make sure that you can start on time and fill up your program? So this is just some of the examples of what we're going to ask in terms of describing your project. What are the services you're going to be providing? How are folks going to, you're used to this one, the HUD question. How are they going to obtain and stay in housing? Are you going to use critical time intervention? How are you going to address all the slew of needs that folks have? And what Shannon says is really important, because keeping in mind that the goal is to serve folks with severe service needs. And so that's always going to be the context that you're answering these questions. How are you going to find employment for folks? How are you going to engage folks? We just said this, how are you going to make sure that you're serving people with the highest needs? And then how are you going to develop and adjust the strategy for serving these populations as time goes on? Okay, so there are extra points available. So this is not like a threshold requirement. We just wanted to make sure you knew. HUD is very interested in ensuring that all the projects that they fund are tapping into all other resources that exist, whether it's a housing resource, a healthcare resource. And so what they're saying is, we'll give you extra points. And as you know, when HUD says they'll give extra points, we give extra points. So if you can leverage other funding from healthcare organizations. So if you are able to demonstrate that at least 50% of the amount being requested is from a healthcare organization, and then we are looking for a written commitment letter. So that's the healthcare leveraging piece.
Again, those things are not required, but they're encouraged. Yeah.
Correct. Everyone's going to do a budget. And again, you'll see we reference the instructions lots and lots of times. Oh, I see Kathy has her hand raised, so it may have been for the previous slide. What's happening, Kathy?
So you think we might, I don't know how we could get any kind of a healthcare commitment letter by the 17th?
Yeah. That was my thought initially when we started to talk about this. If you think you have that funding, you'll tell us about it, and then you'll just let us know that a letter couldn't be gotten in that period of time. And then I don't know, again, we're sort of building the plane as we're flying it here, how that will impact scoring. But it's a good point. The turnaround time on all of this is really very, very quick. So we get that. Yeah. But certainly tell us about it. Don't not include that information because you can't attach something, or maybe what you attach is, what it's going to be, and let us know when you anticipate getting a letter.
So there's a couple of questions in the chat. What if we are a healthcare organization along with a housing provider? That fits the that fits the requirement. So then you would just get an official letter on your organization's letterhead. to say that you yourselves are providing the 50%. That's what you're doing. And then the second question, can the healthcare organization contributions be in kind? Yes, I believe is the answer to that question. Yeah.
All right, anything else? Okay, so you're all going to do budgets. So whatever your allowable expenses are for that particular budget line item, we're going to ask you about. You folks who have been funded in the past and know we're going to work with you on the rental assistance budgets. So folks who haven't applied with us before, you may not know this. So you may apply and say, I'm going to do these 20 units in Waterbury. And we're going to say, ooh, as we look at how the funding is working out for BOS, ooh, we actually need 25 units. So we'll come back to you and say, can you do 25 units? We might also say, oh, as we're kind of moving around funding, we only can do 10 units in Waterbury. Does that work? So when we say, yes, we'd like to put your application forward, we'll come back to you and say, this is what it looks like. Are you okay with that? Or do you still want to move ahead? So again, the veterans in the room know that's how we work, but anyone who's new may not know that. So this is really important. There are match requirements for everyone except for PSH. Really important. It is 25% of the total grant. And unfortunately, in the past, people have not met this threshold requirement. And it is a threshold requirement, which means we can't even process your application if you don't get the match right. If you're confused or you don't understand what a match is, or call us and we will help you. But it is 25% of the total grant, not of what you're requesting from us. So if you're a service provider, but you're also doing a budget for rental assistance, if you're asking for $100,000, you need a $25,000 match. Does anyone have questions on that? Okay. Shannon, who does lots of monitoring for us. Oh, wait, we have a hand. Wayne?
For the match, what kind of documentation do you need for an acceptable match?
Yeah, the great question. We do not need documentation. You're just going to tell us what it is.
And your source.
Yep, you're just going to tell us your source. All right, anything else? I'll do the plug that Shannon likes, which is it's much easier if it's a cash match than an in-kind match, because the documentation required for an in-kind match is rough. And
Yeah.
when folks have it, they often are just not meeting HUD's requirements. So I know it's easy for us to say, here, get cash. I love that, cash preferable. We like cash. But if you can do the cash match, it'll help you later if you get monitored by HUD, because you don't want to not be able to meet the match, because that's really important in the HUD world. All right, I got to keep moving. All right, project component specific section. So this is just for PSH. You guys all know what PSH is. We already talked about Demas is going to be the applicant. And if you do apply for PSH, you do not need to show the match. Eligible populations are people who meet dedicated plus. We're going to have a couple of slides on dedicated plus that I'm not going to talk about because of the time, but you guys can use that. And many folks on the room know what dedicated plus is. Eric did this one for us, which is awesome. So at least 5,000, no more than 9,000. This is really important too, because it is a threshold requirement. So please ask for the money that you can ask for. As we talked about before, rental assistance, services, project administration. Oh, and HMIS too, though, right, Shannon?
Yeah, HMI, yes.
So I'll fix that on that slide because it should also say HMIS. And this is what I said before, but this is important just because I don't want anyone to come with an expansion project. We cannot do expansion projects. So these need to create new units altogether.
Right.
I'm not going to do these. You guys can read dedicated plus. You guys know what rapid rehousing is, right? It's affordable housing with support services. These are the eligible people who are in category 1, who are literally homeless, or in category 4, who are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. Rapid rehousing, just so you know the structure. So DOH will be the applicant, ACT is the fiduciary. So rapid rehousing is a little bit different. So your minimum is 4,000, but your maximum still is 9,000 for support services. That's not right. I missed this one. So not you, I'm going to take the third bullet out because we are not doing expansion.
We'll
And
take that out.
allowable expenses are rental assistance support services. So the third bullet's not correct. We will correct that. This needs to be creating brand new units. So if you already have a great project with 20 units, I know it would be nice if you could tack 10 more on. Can't do that, unfortunately, but you can apply for 10 brand new units.
Yeah. And HMIS is an allowable expense
And
under
HMIS.
rapid rehousing.
All right, we will need to update that.
So this is me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we talked about leveraging healthcare resources before. Another thing that there is additional points in this NOFO for is leveraging housing resources. So what HUD is asking is that housing resources are leveraged again for any rental assistance or unit operating funding from a source other than COC or ESG. So if you have low income tax credit, housing, Liz might have other examples, but some source other than COC or ESG. And what they want you to do is show that for at least 50% of the new PSH units created for this project, or at least 50% of the participants anticipated to serve rapid rehousing project, they're funded through this source other than COC or ESG dollars. And then they're asked, we are asking, again, these are suggested, they're not required, but we're also asking to provide a written commitment from the relevant funding source demonstrating the number of the new units that will be developed or set aside and the date that they will be available.
Yep. And Shannon, I'm just going to stop quick. No match is required for PSH because DEMIS provides so much service funding that it works out for the match. So we end up putting, and because DEMIS is the applicant, it just works out that way so that we don't need, PSH doesn't need a match. And then can funds be used to provide services for homeless youth? Sure. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
As long as it fits any of these eligible categories and project models, you are fine. That's it.
Next, you got next slide.
Yes.
Services only, supportive services only projects. We add one extra condition for you all is we ask you how you're going to develop a street outreach plan to identify people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And I would just say, give some thought. Linked here is the street outreach plan that that are already used by the CANs from the PATH projects. So take a look at that to give you an idea for street outreach plans. I know some of you already are providers of PATH and are well familiar with the street outreach plan, but think about how you're going to coordinate with the plan that already exists in your CAN region. Rural projects. So Liz talked about this before. Only applicants proposing to serve participants in Litchfield County may apply for funding targeted to rural. There's the link to eligible counties that HUD decided were rural. So if you're an organization that is not in Litchfield County, but proposes to do this project for people in Litchfield County, you're eligible to apply. Your organization does not have to be in Litchfield County, but the services provided have to be there. Eric, you have a question? No? Here.
So sorry, so you're saying the outreach services only for outreach I just want to make sure I understand, can only be in Litchfield?
No, that's not, no, that's a separate whole slot. Like, no, this doesn't apply to supportive services only. You can have an unsheltered supportive services only project or a rural supportive services only project.
Okay, so just a quick question, and you may or may not be able to answer this, but as you know, I mean, the outreach services pretty much across the state is kind of somewhat limited to like PATH providers, maybe some of the folks that got funding through in the initial beginning of the COVID pandemic, maybe the ESG expansion, right, that came out and that DOH put out. So my question is, if you're already one of these providers and you're looking at, is it appropriate for that provider to maybe look at this RFP
Of
as
course.
maybe a means to achieve sustainable funding, since the funding for those like say the ESG, the extension got granted, but those funds will stop eventually. Can someone look at this as a way to achieve sustainable funding for that continued level of outreach services?
So I guess my answer to that is a limited yes. So I would say you could certainly look at it that way, but HUD, we've attended the webinars that they put out for this funding opportunity, and they are not able to comment on future NOFOs. So the question was asked, after the 3 years is up, will this just these projects just wrap in to the regular NOFO cycle and be renewed annually? And their answer was that they would hope so, but that they can't for sure guarantee that. So that's we would hope so. And certainly I would want people to apply for this thinking it can be an extension to make your outreach services more robust than they already are if you already have some outreach funding.
Okay, thank you, Shannon.
Yeah. There are other questions in the chat.
Yeah, Amanda has a question. It says that SSO projects are the only ones that are required to serve unsheltered. Since it seemed the others are open to category 1. She said they said yes at NAEH. I'm not sure I understand.
Sorry, the yes at NAEH was to Eric's question. HUD did
okay.
they said that they've just been telling people, yes, the plan is that these will eventually get rolled into the COC project.
Oh, that one. Okay, I'm sorry. I was confused. I thought it went to the first one. Okay, so all projects are required to propose a plan of how your project is going to help unsheltered homelessness. It's a good question, Amanda. So that's what Shannon was talking about. So your plan doesn't have to be, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get 50 unsheltered people and put them into my project. You're not required to say that. Your plan needs to be, I'm serving people with the most severe needs. And in doing that, and in housing people from the shelter, and you might be doing an outreach program, but it's not only about unsheltered. And so for the unsheltered, it's category 1 and 4. And then Shannon's going to talk it's a little bit different for the rural project.
Perfect. So this slide, wait, let me just go back. I'm sorry.
Nope.
Okay, so the last full bullet. So
yes.
There are also additional points for projects that serve structurally disadvantaged areas. And this again is a new HUD term for us. So they say structurally disadvantaged is defined as geographic areas having high levels of homelessness, housing distress, poverty, which are located where COC services have not, until now, been entirely available, right? So if you're going for rural, we're asking you this question in the application, and we're asking you to describe also how your agency determined your area was structurally disadvantaged. So we do good examples of data that support how you could say that your area is structurally disadvantaged. Look at poverty rates. Are they significantly higher in your area than the rest of the COC's area? Look at rates of homelessness that are higher, housing distress, overcrowding, severely substandard housing in that area, if they're higher than the rest of the COC. And COC services, so that have been entirely unavailable. An example would be trust lands or reservations. And we're data, we really like data. The reviewers, the scoring committee really likes data. So use CT CAN data, use HICPIT data. If you have project data, or if you're looking up the rates of poverty, give us your sources where you got those rates, those kinds of things.
Great.
Eligibility, like Liz just alluded to this. So if you're applying for a rural project, you have an extra category of homelessness that participants can come from. So category 1 and 4 are the standard for the regular NOFO people eligible for your projects. Category 1 is people lacking fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence. And category 4 adds people fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or other dangerous conditions. So these rural projects can also serve category 2 homeless, which is defined as people who will imminently lose their primary nighttime residence. And it has these caveats that are listed here: residence lost within 14 days, no subsequent residence has been identified, lacking resources or support networks, needing to obtain other housing. And this includes people who are within 14 days of losing their housing they own, rent, share, or are living in without paying rent. There are also special activities that HUD has made available for this rural opportunity. And again, I'm going to say for probably the 15th time, rural, you have to be serving people in Litchfield County, right? So it's very limited, the people who may apply for this funding source. But for those who do, we have these extra supportive services categories. So short-term emergency lodging and motels, and there's much more information on everything, including this in the instructions. Short-term emergency lodging and motels are shelters. This is for new shelter beds only. It's not an already existing shelter that you're now going to use these funds to pay for. Cost to use federal inventory property programs, that gets into nitty gritty. And again, there's more information in the instructions. Capacity building. So this is one of the first times I've seen them say, HUD say people use this for financial incentives to retain staff. And I know that's an issue everywhere, right? To give staff education, training, and this can be up to 20% of project funds. You can use funds to repair and make housing habitable. They gave examples of windows, updating or fixing windows, doors, roofing, up to $10,000 per structure, emergency food and clothing, and then up to 6 months of rent or utility arrears for qualifying households. And again, there's more information on that in the instructions. Zengen is what we're going to use to apply. So
and I just want to remind folks, I always want to be mindful if this is your first time with us, anything that's in green and underlined is a link. So that you can, this will take you right to the instructions. So if I'm brand new to Zengen, you're welcome to just jump in, but it's really helpful to take a look at the Zengen instructions, which are different from the RFP instructions.
Yeah. And if it's desirable for anybody here at the end, there's some screenshots in the slides that we're going to go through, but if it's helpful for anybody wants to stay afterwards, I can go into a live session of Zengen if you want to do that. So good news again, and just as the last opportunity, if you have already created a project application profile, you don't need to recreate it, just review it, update it to make sure all the information is up to date, and then you'll move on to the separate project application. Project application profile. So here is the link to get into Zengen. You need to put in your email. There are certain criteria to a password, create your password, and sign up. The project application, so after you click the blue sign up button, when you create your password, then you create a profile. So for those of you who haven't been in here at all before, this is where you say your organization name, who's going to represent your organization, and all the questions, the very basic questions that HUD asks for everything. Who's your organization? What's your history of dealing with HUD or federal grants and that kind of information? And this is what the screen looks like. Create a project application profile. So all of the fields with an asterisk are required. Some of those things like we were talking about before, these are suggested and they'd be great if you have, but if you don't, there's no asterisk next to them. Click create profile at the bottom or top right. You can save a draft anytime if you need to leave the application and come back later. That's also in the top right or bottom right, save draft, and it'll bring you back to the application, saving what you've already completed in it. On the bottom of the home page, after you've created your profile, it'll show you this, and there'll be a get started button. So you just click the plus and the get started, and it'll open the project application. So you'll have to click open as well. New project. So again, there's an asterisk next to all required fields. Save draft. When you're done with this, you click mark complete, and then you will be able to submit. It might signal to you, there's some things that when you try to do mark complete, if there's things that are required that you haven't filled in, it'll tell you, and it'll highlight red. So if you look at that and say, yeah, I looked at it, but I don't have it, or it's not relevant to me, enter if it's a dollar or number amount, enter 0. And if it's a word response that you didn't give, just click NA. So yes, even though you clicked mark complete, it's still not submitted. This screen shows up where there's a green submit button. You have to click the submit button in order for us to actually receive it. And then once that is done, there's a message saying this has been submitted, and you will receive a confirmation email. Clicking view. So after you submit, you can click view, and it'll show the document just submitted and enable you to download that document, save it as a PDF, which we recommend if you want to do that. If you want to submit additional new project applications, you go back to the home page. So at the top left, there will be a word that says homepage that's clickable. Click on that, and it'll set next to where it said begin, like where you're get started before, there'll be an add another box. You just click that and go on to your next application. Again, we recommend either printing or saving as a PDF the application that you submit. So here, just go through these directions if you want to save it to your computer. So tips, again, I'm just going to remind you, complete all required fields. The HUD has started to say this to all of us COCs when we're doing NOFO applications. If we're asking you a question that has several parts, it's a great idea to put your response in those several parts. And if we have a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or ABC, which I can't think that we have many of, we have more bulleted questions, but you just say, this is the answer to this part, and just very clearly go down and answer each section of the part. If we're asking for a reason, and you're probably going to get more points if all of the sections of each question are answered. There's just conditional logic throughout. So if you're saying you're rural and you're an SSO, you're going to get different questions than if you're saying you're unsheltered and a PSH. That's hopefully not something you all should have to worry about. Pay attention to word count limits. It won't, the Zengen will not allow you to go over the word count limit. Households and units, just make sure all of the parts of your application match one another. If you're saying you're going to serve 10 households, talk about in the description how you're going to serve those 10 households, where you're going to get those 10 households from. Make sure different points of the application match one another. Pay attention to the budget line item descriptions. We put in the help text a lot, especially in supportive services, and there's some in the HMIS section since that's new as well. A description of these are the types of things that are eligible for this budget line item. Pay attention to potential attachments. Not many attachments are required, but some are. Look up information on NCRA if that's something you're interested in using. And match. We just were so sad to see that some applicants didn't even meet the threshold to be reviewed by the scoring committee with a last opportunity. So 25% match, I feel like we can't say that enough.
Yeah. There's a question about if folks need technical assistance, you can just reach out to Shannon, to me, to CT BOS. One of us will help you. And like Shannon said, because I know we're nearing 2 o'clock, if folks want to stay on, we're happy to do a live Zengen with folks and get people started, especially new folks or people who want a refresher.
Scoring factors. So they're similar to what they were for the regular NOFO opportunity. Objective criteria and system performance. This is new. We are going to use an average of your project results across the 2022 renewal evaluations for all of your organizations who have had projects in the renewal evaluation. If you haven't, there will be another process for you. So look at specifically in Zengen, it says to submit different data to us so we can use similar process for you as well. We're asking you all unmet need. Why do you need your project? Why does it need to serve these people? How is that gonna help end homelessness and unsheltered homelessness in Connecticut? Timeliness is important, that you can get your project up and running in a timely fashion. Supportive services and housing first. We're going to look at how you answer the questions related to those. HUD supplemental NOFO priorities. So those were identified throughout, where we're asking how you work with people with lived experience of homelessness, how you are going to support the plan, those types of things. And then your application budget quality. Did you meet the thresholds and that type of thing? We are working on a scoring factor document, and when we complete it, it will be uploaded to the COC application page, and we'll send you all out an email on that.
Yep. So there's a question. For the rural, but it's the rural or the unsheltered. And I'm glad you're asking this. It's $900,000 over 3 years.
Yeah.
So it is not per year. And I'm glad you asked this because when you are doing your budgets, you are going to do an annual budget, and then Shannon made the magic happen. The Jetsons are for real, and she made it multiply by 3. But it is worth keeping in mind as you're doing that, you're going to do an annual budget, and it is described well in Zengen, but you will do an annual budget, and then it will magically turn it into a 3-year budget. Yes, the application is in Zengen now. It is live. You could click in it. Everyone can go in and get started. Anything else? Okay.
So additional tips for your application, as with many applications, make sure you highlight what makes your agency and project unique. The people who score these applications, they kind of do this on a regular basis. So anything that's going to make you stand out and look unique and attractive is helpful. And memorable, honestly. So provide concrete examples of how participants will be served. Again, if this is something you've done before and been successful with before, and you have data on that, it would be great if you could send us and include that information as well. Also, name any partner community agencies, how you already work with them possibly, and how you will coordinate with them in this project. All the parts of the application should work together, as I mentioned before. Make sure you meet the match if you're a street outreach or a rapid rehousing project, and ensure for supportive services you meet that minimum and are under the maximum. And there is, I would just say, we have the limits that the COC has voted on for rapid rehousing and PSH with supportive services, but the COC has not voted on, because it hasn't been a thing before, supportive services only projects for the supportive services budget. So there aren't those same limits with that. Was there a hand raised? I think.
Oh, I didn't see one. Is there?
Okay.
Does anyone have one? Nope.
Frequently asked questions. We are going to keep track, especially since this is a completely new thing for all of us. We're going to keep track of questions and post a document on the COC application page. So deadline to submit questions is the 12th of, what month is it? The 12th of August.
I don't even know what day it is now, yeah.
But
Yeah.
we'll keep track of those.
And that doesn't mean if you have a ZenGen question, or if you want to
Yeah.
ask us a question, we're happy to try to answer it. We're asking for it by the 12th because you might be asking a question that we have to ask HUD. So we're not trying to be mean. We just can only, and we can't guarantee anything necessarily with HUD, but we just want to make sure that if you ask us something really hard, that we have time to get to HUD.
Mhm. So reminders about due dates. The due date for the
right.
applications in ZenGen is August 17th. It's a Wednesday. Always read those instructions. They have so much good information in them. Sign up for CT BOS emails. This is how you'll get all of the updates that we were talking about when the scoring is up and ready for you all to see, and many other things. Important links. This is a link to the HUD COC application page, the actual application in ZenGen, RFP instructions, and ZenGen instructions. Questions?
I know everyone's stunned probably. That's how I felt when I first read the note, when I first read the note, folk. Annie, you have a
Annie
question?
has a question.
First, I feel like I have a question. I just for clarification, I think when you answered Eric's question, it's the same answer, but in terms of where category 4 fits into the first, the unsheltered, it's the same concept. So it's just working with folks who are category 4, but are at risk of becoming unsheltered is where
Yes.
that would fall into play. Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else? This is not your last time to ask us questions.
No.
We'll try to get back to people, as quickly as we can. You can call us, you can email us. Again, it's not like there are no dumb questions. You guys ask fantastic questions. There really are just no dumb questions. We're all trying to wrap our head around what's brand new. And like I said, we're so excited. We really want folks to be successful. We would love for this money to come to BOS.
Hello, this is Eric again. I'm in Z-Engine right now, and were you going to show us how to get to the application in Z-Engine, or?
Yeah, sure. I think
Yeah,
we
I don't see
want to,
any.
well, yeah, I think what we're going to do, because it is 2, we will let folks, we'll give back that's 1:59, 1 minute. And anyone who wants to stay, and we'll stop the recording, and we'll let anyone who wants to stay on,